Director of, hi everybody, this is Neil Makhija. I'm Executive Director of Impact. We recruit, train, and elect Indian Americans running for office across the United States. Really excited today to have our first South Asian woman who will be elected to office in New York State, Jenifer Rajkumar, who's the Democratic nominee in the New York State Assembly 38th District, and that's in South Queens. Jenifer is a civil rights lawyer, a professor, and a public servant, and she's really a trailblazer in New York, and we're really thrilled to have her today to hear about her background, what inspired her to run in what was a pretty tough race, and what she plans to do now that she's going to be in office. So before that, let me just remind folks of our endorsements. We've got endorsements nationwide for Indian American candidates, and it's really a time from the top of the ticket, from the Biden-Harris ticket, where we have Kamala Harris being the first in our community to achieve that level in United States politics and government, but also, that's happening nationwide. That's happening in Pennsylvania, where we have Nikhil Saval, who will be the first in the state Senate, and Nina Ahmad in the Auditor General's office. And it's happening in North Carolina with Rani Chatterjee, and several other states, including Arizona and Texas, where we're winning seats that simply were not on the radar before for our community, and in places where our community is growing. So I'm very excited to have Jenifer here because Queens is a place that is special to many immigrant communities. It's one of the most diverse places, not just in the United States, but in the world. It's where my father first came when he immigrated to the United States. And I know that's true of many other people, whether they ended up in different places around the country or stayed in Queens. So with that, let me just welcome Jenifer Rajkumar to the Impact Fireside Chat. And for those of you who don't know the name, Fireside Chats, a chat is a beloved Indian street food, and of course, Fireside Chats are FDR's very kind of memorable chats with the nation and conversations during the Great Depression. We're in a very difficult time here again in the United States and in New York and in Queens. Queens was very much among the hardest hit by the COVID epidemic. And I'm excited to hear about what Jenifer did during that time, campaigning during that time, and winning the nomination. So with that, Jenifer, thank you for coming in. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about the district, what inspired you to run, but I guess let's just start with that. Tell us more about where you are in South Queens, and then we'll go into what it was like running this year.
Well, thank you so much, Neil. I'm so happy to be here with Impact, and I applaud the work that you are doing all over the country to support South Asian candidates. You're really on the verge of helping everyone make history. So thank you so much. So what we did here in South Queens was we made history with the support of the network of Impact and others. I'm so proud to be the first South Asian woman elected in New York State, but I'm certainly not the last one. This district in South Queens is 70% immigrant. And these immigrant populations have been underserved and overlooked for a very, very long time. Our district was also one of the top 5 lowest voter turnout districts in the whole state. And our campaign changed that dynamic. What we did was we energized the district by going door to door and speaking to everyone individually. And we ended up pumping up turnout 5 times. And more people came out than ever before. And we ended up winning by 27 percentage points, which was the largest margin of any challenger in the state. So I'm just very honored for the support of everybody. And I'm looking forward to using my position to uplift all of our many diverse communities in South Queens.
So tell me, is that, I mean, it's extraordinary. You said 5 times the turnout, is that right?
Yes, yes.
Which, if you talk to a political consultant, I'm sure that they told you that that was not within the realm of what's possible.
Well, we knew that it was possible, and I'm so glad that it came to fruition. Honestly, we did not know what the results would be, but we just worked really hard. And as you mentioned, Neil, we worked even during the pandemic. So the last 3 months of the campaign, the coronavirus pandemic hit Queens very hard. And so we stopped our campaign because we could no longer make contact with individual voters while keeping them safe. So instead, what we did is we just transformed our operation into a 24/7 coronavirus response team that operated in Bengali, in Punjabi, in Spanish, in Hindi. And we served food to hungry families. We got doctors on the phone to people who had COVID in their homes. So we did all of these things. I spoke to families whose loved ones had passed away from COVID. I did things like I helped plan funerals, but I also helped the family navigate their new situations in life. And during all of this, I formed very close relationships with my constituents. So that is something that I will always treasure. Going through this crisis made us a lot closer. I have people that I spoke to on the phone that I never met in person because we weren't allowed to meet during the pandemic. And those relationships are so close. And so that is one thing that came through this crisis. We became closer and stronger.
I think it's extraordinary, and an example of showing that you have to adapt to the times and serve people in the way that they need it in their most in terms of their most urgent needs. And most campaigns, we tell candidates, impact candidates, that you've got to speak to the most urgent issues that people are facing on a daily basis. And obviously now that was COVID, and it's not the same as when you're having debates or putting out policy positions on kind of the broad platform of the party and other things. You actually showed kind of the immediate constituent services was what people needed, and probably why they elected you, because they saw that you stood up to kind of you rose to the occasion in terms of what was happening. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of your decision making in terms of how you were thinking about what was going to happen during that time and what you should do? Because I'm sure there are elected officials, there are government offices. Why did you think that you had to take on this work?
Well, I was advised when the pandemic first hit. I was advised to not do anything. Some people said, don't do anything. If you do anything, it'll look like you were politicizing the pandemic. So you should just sit tight and raise money. But I couldn't do that, because what I realized is that if you want to be a leader, then when there's a crisis and people are hurting, you have to step up. So I didn't see any other option. There was really no other way to be. And I think that right now, government matters and leadership matters more than ever, especially as the district and the state of New York recovers from the pandemic. Right now, we need real leaders in Albany. It's not enough to be mediocre. It's not enough to just sign on to legislation and not be active. So I am happy and excited and ready and willing to rise to the occasion for the people of South Queens and New York.
So the rest of the country also got to see Governor Cuomo really do that as well. And of course, you worked for him as a special counsel, and you served, I think, a director of immigration affairs for the governor's office. Is that right?
Correct.
And can you tell us a little bit about working in that position? First, did you see all of the PowerPoint presentations that the country got to see from Governor Cuomo. What was your experience working with him? And then, of course, specifically, if you can talk about your leadership in the role in immigration affairs.
Yes, I absolutely saw all of the PowerPoints. And there was a time when so many New Yorkers were holed up in their homes during the pandemic. And we would look forward to the governor's coronavirus briefing every morning. It was a source of information and comfort for so many families. And I applaud the governor for rising to the occasion and really showing us that government does matter more now than ever, and real leadership matters now more than ever. So my experience working for the governor in the governor's executive chamber and for the state was incredible. It was an experience that I'll always remember and treasure. I learned a lot about leadership during that time. I operated statewide. And one thing I did was I directed immigration for New York State in the age of Trump. So as soon as Trump was elected, I became the director of immigration for New York State. So it was certainly a very interesting time. And I was very proud to lead and create the first program of its kind to ensure that all immigrants who can't afford legal counsel get legal counsel. And this is significant because studies show that an immigrant's chance of success in any immigration proceeding increases 14 times just if they have legal counsel. So New York is now one of the first states in the nation where immigrants don't have to be locked up in detention alone without help. And I am so proud to have had the opportunity to build and create that program for our state. And in doing that, I got to travel all over the state. I went everywhere from the Canadian border, where we have Guatemalan immigrants working on farm fields, to South Queens, my home. And I got to see all of the immigrant communities. And I'm so inspired by how hard all our immigrants work. And that's part of the reason why I ran for this position, because I saw that immigrants work 25 hours a day, work as hard as necessary, but they need a way to come up. And what I want to do is help immigrant communities navigate America, navigate our courtrooms, our government, our educational institutions, so that all that hard work really comes to fruition and people are able to rise.
I think we've seen a similar issue in Philadelphia in terms of right to counsel with regard to landlord-tenant issues. That's something that a number of council members have led, and it seems it's common sense. If you have a lawyer, you can actually vindicate your rights and be represented adequately, so that how to make your case in the courts. And I'm sure that's incredibly important with immigrant communities where they're in a brand new country and don't necessarily have the same relationships with folks in government or folks who can understand where they're coming from at the most basic level in terms of language access. But I think it goes broader than that. Can you tell us a little bit about how you came to appreciate that work? I know you're a lawyer and you worked on civil rights cases as well. I assume that's where you got this appreciation for the importance of having counsel and being represented, and especially on some of the uphill battles, I think, in the plaintiff sphere in terms of discrimination cases and others that I think you've worked on.
Absolutely. So first of all, thank you for pointing out the right to counsel for immigrants. New York State doesn't yet have a right to counsel for immigrants in immigration proceedings, but I'm hopeful that we'll get there because access to justice for all is so important. And as you point out, Neil, that has been something that's been very dear to me. I am a civil rights lawyer, and I went to law school to help people, to make sure that domestic violence victims had representation, to make sure that those who don't have a voice have a voice. That was my goal. And I experimented with all different types of ways to help people, to represent people. I represented individuals one at a time. Then I became a class action litigation lawyer representing whole classes of people experiencing discrimination. So one class action that I'm very proud of was one of my first cases out of law school, which was a class action on behalf of 5,600 women workers who are experiencing discrimination in the workplace. And we sued Novartis Pharmaceutical Companies, a very large multinational corporation, for discrimination. So when women got pregnant at this company, they effectively got demoted or fired. Now, pregnancy discrimination is illegal, but it still happens all the time. And the company wasn't enforcing anti-discriminatory laws. So our lawsuit was successful, and it was actually the largest jury award ever in an employment discrimination suit. And the UN called it one of the top 10 cases in the world advancing women's rights. And I was just so proud to work on that case and to really help women workers really get a voice. And it inspired me, but so much inspires me. When I meet people all over the district and hear their stories, I'm very eager to make sure that they are fully represented and have a strong advocate.
And were there parts of that case or your work in civil rights litigation where you saw obstacles that could only be fixed by the legislature or Congress, and things that maybe you're excited to tackle when you are going to be now a lawmaker instead of kind of a private enforcer?
Well, absolutely. The first thing that really struck me in that case was the courage of our law firm and other lawyers on the case, but also the courage of our clients. Women who really had to be deposed and step up and talk about things that weren't easy. And it's that courage that really gives me so much hope. But yes, I realized, to your question, Neil, that to make a true difference, I needed power. So that's one reason why I decided to go into politics and run for office, was that I really wanted the laws changed so that things could become more equitable for workers and for people. So I did a total 180 and I decided to run for office. And here I am before you today as the Democratic nominee.
And so what are some of the issues? Like if you could pass your law, I know it's a complicated process, but if you could pass your laws tomorrow, like what are the top things that you would want to introduce? And I know it takes time to get into leadership, but New York is it's essentially a Democratic state, and you're in the majority party, so you'll have some opportunities to have your bills introduced. Like, what do you think are your top priorities?
Well, let's start with workers. My district is full of hardworking people, and so one thing I want to do is promote equality and justice for workers, which includes, for example, tipped wage workers. Tipped wage workers currently operate under a different minimum wage standard. The $15 minimum wage in New York State doesn't apply to tipped workers because it is assumed that they'll make up the difference through tips. So that's not fair to hold them to another minimum wage standard. So I want to make sure that they receive the same minimum wage standard as all other workers. I also want to make sure that we finally pass the sweat bill in New York. So oftentimes workers make the money, but their wages are stolen. The employers exploit certain loopholes to avoid paying the wage. So that can be fixed by the passage of our sweat bill here in New York State. I would like to make sure that workers have employment. And there's real opportunities here in South Queens to create jobs. The JFK airport is right near my district and is currently undergoing a $3 billion development. What does that mean? That means the opportunity for jobs for so many immigrant families in my district. There are so many immigrant workers, South Asian and Latino families that could get jobs in this new development, in the airport and in the development. And that job could really change a whole family's life. So I'm going to be a very, very strong advocate to make sure we're fully represented in that development.
Mhm. And if you could tell me more about kind of the district, specifically in terms of what's there. You mentioned the new jobs that could be in JFK Airport. Like, what are the most common, or I guess, what are the largest employers now, or where are people working? And I mean, I imagine that many of them are not because of COVID, in some of the contexts that you're talking about. But if you can give us a sense of that.
It's an incredibly diverse district. We have teachers, Uber drivers, Lyft drivers, taxi cab drivers, small business owners, really all across the board, hardworking people that are struggling right now. And we also have actually a lot of essential workers, workers on the front lines of the pandemic. So I want to make sure that hazard pay protections are fully in place for people who are risking their lives every day. And these essential workers, food delivery people, nurses, they are really keeping our economy running, and they deserve fair treatment. So this district is very diverse. There are also gig workers, as I mentioned, those who are, for example, Uber and Lyft drivers. And gig workers also deserve full protections. So I'm going to be a strong advocate for that as well.
Mm-hmm.
I'll also be an advocate for the full range of civil rights protections for all. And also a priority is going to be job creation and getting our workers in a place where they can put food on the table and can live comfortably, can pay their rent once again.
Mm-hmm. And I just want to shout out, thank you for those of you who are watching. Ajay, he is telling you great work, which I agree. And it's I'm honored to kind of have you on and to recognize, as Ajay does, that this is really important to highlight your efforts, because we want to see people like you who are advocating for working people and immigrant communities really rise and succeed in government and politics. So, we certainly wish you the best in New York State. If anyone has any questions and wants to put them in, I didn't make a call for it, but I can read the comments. But one thing I just want to kind of put out there is who inspires you, kind of what, are there people either close to you or prominent figures that have inspired you to step into public service? You had so many options in terms of, what to do out of a place like Stanford Law School. You could have gone to, corporations, and obviously you've been focused in public service. But even within that, you were doing great work in as a civil rights litigator, as a public servant. Kind of what really drew you to the legislative and elected office? Are there people that have particularly inspired you?
I have many inspirations, but one of them is actually a historical figure, Alice Paul, who was a suffragist. And what I really admire about her is simple courage. She was someone who said, I'm going to go to prison and I'm going to go on a hunger strike until American women have the right to vote in this country. And there's actually, if you look at the New York Times from that time, there's a front page story. It says, hunger striker has not eaten for 72 hours. And so when I think of the courage of people, what they're willing to do for equality for everybody, that gives me enormous courage myself to try to do bold things to help people. Something else that always inspires me is people every day. I'll never forget many years ago when I was campaigning another time, I passed a park in a low-income area surrounded by public housing. And in that park, there was a playground, it was a swing set, and the whole playground was dilapidated. It really was a dump, to be honest. But in the midst of that, there was a child. He was a Black boy around 11 years old on a swing. And he was swinging back and forth and had the biggest smile on his face in the middle of that dilapidated playground. And something in my heart I felt something that never really left. And I thought about what would life be like for him and how we're going to make this a better city. So it's regular people every day that honestly keep me going. And figures that have been courageous in our history, political figures like LBJ, who actually got things done, he made things happen. I always appreciate leaders like our governor right now, Governor Cuomo, who really are stepping up and making things happen. Because for me, it's about what actions can I take that will make an actual difference in people's lives. And that's it. So I want to do whatever's necessary so that people's lives are better.
Well, thank you for joining us. I'm really excited to see what you can do in the legislature. It's obviously a critical moment for essential workers and people who have had their livelihoods, put on hold and taken away during this pandemic. And it's really inspiring to hear what you did during the pandemic, which I think is probably a big reason why people were inspired to vote for you, because they saw your leadership during that time. And I know, as you said, you are going to be the South Asian woman in New York State, and also the first South Asian elected out of the city, which is really long overdue. And I hope that when the lines are redrawn, and I think you'll have a role in this, but we can have districts that preserve the community and keep people together so that they can be represented in the future. But if you wanted to say anything else to our folks and listeners, feel free. But it's a pleasure to have you, and looking forward to working together as you become an elected official.
Well, thank you. Impact will always have a close place in my heart, and I'm the first South Asian woman elected in New York State to state office, but I'm not the last one. And I'm here to help anyone in our community who wants to run for office, who wants to enter public service in any role. Please don't do it alone. I've done it, and I'm here to help and elevate our community, just like Impact is doing nationwide.
Thank you very much, Jenifer. And just to turn to our op-ed in New Jersey in the Star Ledger today. It's written by Deepak Raj and myself. Deepak is the co-founder of Impact and a leader in New Jersey on many fronts: philanthropic, governmental, civic, and in business. And in that, you'll hear about how New Jersey has really led the way as well, in addition to New York, in terms of electing Indian American leaders who are really going on and having some major accomplishments for their communities, both at the city level, in the state, and with our first Sikh American Attorney General, Gurbir Grewal, at the state level as well. So please take a look at that. You can find it on our website, iaimpact.org. You can find out more information from our summit. But thank you, Jenifer, for joining us, and looking forward to our next Fireside Chat and our Impact Summit, which will be Saturday, October 10th. More details to come, but look out for that. Thank you, everyone.